example for your troops, and everyone sees that if you're not respecting your superior, why are they going to respect you? Why are they going to show you the respect that you've earned by being their superior? So don't let your personal feelings about someone color how you treat them when there are other people around. You have to maintain professionalism.
That also goes with the fact that you're not saluting the person, you're saluting the rank. You're respecting the rank that that person has. That establishes the institute. You're maintaining the institute. That's what our primary job is.
Yes, sir, thank you. Servant leader, he said, servant leader, write this down. We are servant leaders, we're here to serve the troops. We lead them and we're here to make sure they succeed. Because King gets to present my favorite quote, so I won't ruin it for her right now. But you'll know it when she gets to it. Don't show fear. He talked a lot about that. When you're flustered, you need to maintain that sense of calm, like Gunner Sergeant is telling us at PT all the time. You're tired, you're beaten up, you have to keep yourself together. You have to be a leader in front of your sailors and Marines. You can't let it get the best of you, no matter how stressful the situation. Not every man can be in the midst of the battlefield. That really resonated with me because, I'm joining the Navy, not the Marine Corps, so I'm not going to be the one shooting people in Afghanistan, but we're still all a part of this. Everyone is important, and not everyone can be the hero. There is going to be one, and maybe you'll get to be, but maybe you won't, and you can't put yourself there. And then I really liked this. He had a slide with all of the people that he finds inspirational. There are just 4 people from history whose stories really resonated with him that he really liked. One of them was John Paul Jones, and he said that he gave a foundation of history, customs, and courtesies. His ship would never be surrendered. He gave that famous quote, "I have not yet begun to fight." And he also said, "I intend to go into harm's way." I just really liked everything he said. It was awesome. Joshua Chamberlain, he was at Gettysburg. I don't remember his rank, but he was one of the officers at Gettysburg. He was being overrun by a much larger force. 150 of his men showed up the night before and said, "I don't want to fight this battle. I'm not going to do it." And so this guy took the time, he sat down with them the night before for an hour, and he talked to them and he told them all about why they're doing this, why this is important. And every single one of those 150 men showed up the next morning, and they were there to fight. So that just shows that what his men thought of him. They trusted him, and they said, "Okay, I believe in this guy. Everything about this fight is where I need to be." Staff Sergeant Jimmy Howard, he was in a 12-hour fight with 18 men in the dark. And they didn't have grenades, they ran out of all their supplies, and this guy said, "Throw rocks, and then they'll all start to scatter because they think it's grenades, and then we can just pick them off." So he was, what's that word?
Innovative.
What was that?
Innovative.
Innovative, yes. He was innovative. He was creative. He made it work, even though he was out of all of his stuff. And then the next day, or when the battle was over, it was time for them to retreat. And he wouldn't leave until they found the last man. And the last man was dead, but he would not leave until they found that man and brought him home as well. And then Sergeant Leanne Hester, I'm not really sure what she did. Something about a truck. Ma'am, you...
No, but I think it's the only female up there.
That's what I'm saying, ma'am. He said something about she was in a truck and she held her position, so...
Okay.
That's really all I got. She was an MP and she held her position. I'm a little confused about that. But he was a really cool guy. And right after Sergeant Major LaHue, we had a panel of junior officers. We had Lieutenant Van Hook. He was our SWO. Lieutenant Amber Cowan, a female submarine officer. Lieutenant Bakey was our pilot. And Captain Pham, our Marine Corps captain. Lieutenant Van Hook did a tour on a ship and then he did a tour with the Riverines. So I thought that was really cool. I think the Riverines it looks like they get to play in a little splashy pool all the time, but in an awesome way. In a cool fighting way. So I thought that was great. And so they gave opening remarks, and that's what I put up on the slides here, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what they said. But this is just what they wanted to put out there right at first when we got there. So Lieutenant Van Hook talked about leading up, leading your peers, and leading down. So leading up, we're gonna make sure that everyone above us knows what we're doing, knows that we're solid. Leading your peers, you're setting the example for the people around you every single day. You're helping each other out. You're allowing each other to succeed. And it's really one team, one fight. It's a team game in the Navy. And leading down, you're leading your Marines and sailors. That's pretty obvious. Lieutenant Cowan, she described how there are 4 main communities, especially on a ship. There's the junior enlisted, junior officers, and senior officers. And as a junior officer, you have the ability to bring all of those communities together. Because you're in the wardroom with the senior officers, and you have a close relationship with your chief, the senior enlisted. You should also be right there in your division, getting to know your junior enlisted. So you get the perspective of all of them, and you can bring all of those factors into account when you're talking to each group. And there's really no one else who can do that. Lieutenant Bakey, he gave us his 3 main ideas. I'm not really sure what to call this. He said, be a good warfighter first, so tactically proficient. Know your stuff, especially as a pilot, know what you're doing. Be a good manager. That's managing and leading go hand in hand. You have to be able to manage your time, manage other people's time. And he said be likable, which I didn't really like, but he also said be approachable. So I think be approachable is a very good way to be. You want people to come to you with questions. And Captain Pham, he was a TBS instructor, and he was just super excited about TBS. And he gave us the 5 horizontal something from TBS, which I will read to you, 5 horizontal themes, which I'll read to you in a second here. But in his opening statement, he said, we're here to kill bad people and bring our brothers and sisters home. We're like most other professions, the difference is we're here to kill bad people. Other professions don't really do that. They don't leave the house in the morning and think, okay, I'm going to kill someone who's trying to kill my family. But we do. So, Gunnery Sergeant's excited about it. All right. Lieutenant Van Hook really spoke to complacency. He said it's a theme he's seen a lot. Complacency can kill. Don't get complacent. Find a stress outlet. A lot of his major points. Lieutenant Cowan, keep a questioning attitude. She said, always question, ask everyone. And this was a theme across a lot of speakers. If you don't understand, then ask about it. Clarify. You're not gonna be looked down upon for asking your junior sailors or Marines how something works. If they're working on something and you don't know about it, go say, hey, can you teach me about this? And then they'll teach you, and then they'll respect you, because now you know how to do it. And you understood that they have the proficiency, and you're acknowledging their success. Lieutenant Bakey said, question your questioning attitude. So don't question things just because you don't like it. There are procedures in place for a reason. So yes, question things and ask questions, but don't go poking at things that are like set up because you think, oh, but we could do this differently, but you might not know everything that's going on there. So be a little patient there. And Lieutenant Cowan, this was really important for me because I'm about to go join the fleet, and it's quite overwhelming right now thinking about I'm going out to the ship and I'm going to have to do all these things, and everyone keeps talking about it's very stressful and you have 100 things going on. She said, as a junior officer, you're going to drop things. You're going to mess things up. You're going to fail at things, and it's going to be okay. Everyone does it. It's going to happen. There's no way to prevent it. Just do your best. Don't dwell on it. Just move past all your failures. And then Captain Pham, I would like to talk about his 5 horizontal themes because they were very important to him. And Pollard will learn these pretty soon here at TBS. Maybe you'll run into him. He's a cool guy. So the first one, exemplary character. Second, devoted to leading 24/7. And he said servant leader again. It's a recurring theme. We're servant leaders. Third, decide, communicate, and act in the fog of war. Like we said before, don't get overwhelmed. You're the leader. You have to stay the leader even when you're stressed. Fourth, embrace the Corps' warrior ethos. And fifth, mentally strong and physically tough. We all have to be all 5 of those things all the time with everyone. All right, and then who we got next? I believe this is Ro.
Just feel offended.
Alright, I'm going to do a senior case study for Samuel B. Roberts. It's a pretty good story. The ship that got hit by the mine when it was in the Straits of Hormuz during the Gulf whenever Iran was attacking oil tankers. This was the CO, the commanding officer of the Samuel B. Roberts during that incident. And honestly, when I read the case study, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. When I saw him up there, I said it was going to be a good story. So I think this was by far one of my favorite speakers, both because the story was inspiring and he really had a lot to say. And he kind of worked in all the leadership styles that because he went to all the briefs and worked in all leadership styles and talked about them all, but he definitely had his own leadership styles to bring to the table. One thing that he brought up right at the beginning pretty much was the teamwork principles. And he was talking about how in a team you need to have goals, you have goals set, and then for a team to work towards, roles for each person in that team, and then processes and strategies to accomplish the goal. And then you want to make sure you're motivating the team, and interaction and synergy. Just make sure you're interacting and promoting synergy within the team. And one thing he said was remaining calm. Remaining calm helps you, helps whenever you're in a tough situation. He was in a tough situation, the ship was sinking and there's water rushing in, and he remained calm and made clear, decisive decisions. And his calmness helped his sailors get the job done. So he wasn't panicked, he made sure he was calm, made the decisions, he was going through, clearly thinking and everything like that. Even though he was a little bit afraid, he did not show it. He made sure that he presented himself correctly. And then another thing he talked about was this fireman, his name was Fireman Tilley, and he was kind of a screw up, and he went to captain's mast like 3 times, and he gave him a lot of opportunities. So it shows that he was willing to train those sailors and give them chances, even though they were kind of screwed up. And it ended up, Fireman Tilley wound up being the person who saved the ship, and he gives credit to Fireman Tilley, and actually ended up later on leaving the Navy and getting $1 million. So pretty successful guy. But it shows that these people have opportunities. They're not, just because they show up and they're screw up doesn't mean that they start, that in the end they're going to be a screw up. You should give your sailors a chance to work with them. That's what I pull away from that. And then he also said that he was always drilling his sailors, so when bad situations came up, he was going to, all their sailors were going to be ready for the situation, for anything bad that was going to happen. And when it happened, when the mine hit the ship, all the engineers were gone, and they were off working somewhere else, and they didn't have anyone working down in the base of the ship, plugging out the holes. And those sailors, because they were drilling and training so much, and his leadership of making sure that they were ready, pretty much a cook and like some people who were not working as engineers were down in the engineering bay, plugging up the holes and that were seeping water into the ship. And he had to make a tough decision and trust them to save the ship when he asked them, hey, you guys got this, I can find someone else. And they said, no, we've got this. And then you could hear the emotion behind his voice whenever he was talking about the story and how he was pretty much sending them to their death and the chance of them dying. And he trusted them to complete the job from all the training and drilling that he did. So again, one of my favorite speakers. He really resonated with me, especially since I read the case study, and so he was a pretty cool guy. And then the next person that we had talk was Mike Seaman. He was not in the Navy. He's just the director of game day operations. At first, I didn't really think too much of this guy because I was expecting just officers, stuff like that. But he actually had a really had a lot of stuff to bring to the table. And it was great because it brought a perspective outside of the Navy and outside of the military and like officers and stuff like that. And he talked more about leadership from his perspective as being director of game day operations. Obviously, game day operations are a very stressful event. You're handling all the games and everything like that. But some of the things that I pulled away from him was that leadership is about trust. You have to make sure you have trust with your sailors. So your sailors need to trust, you gotta trust your sailors, and your sailors gotta trust you. And it helps build that relationship. And then another thing he said was don't complain. No one wants to hear about your problems because they've got their own problems also. So don't be a leader who's complaining like a lot. You're there to get the job done. And then he also said adapting to your situation. So that way you're not having issues with so that way everyone's ready to go. So it's like adapting to adversity. So if something comes up, you're able to change your style of leadership and complete the task at hand. It also said multitasking is very important, so make sure you're willing to handle multiple things at a time and not be overwhelmed and overstressed. That you're able to complete multiple things rather than just being locked into one thing. And then, he also talked about having a solution. There's 3 parts to this, so having a solution, make sure you're identifying a problem, see the opportunity, and propose multiple possible solutions. So when you're leading, you're going to be looking through that, looking for a solution, and making everything work. And then also, this quote that he had right here, which was that everybody's got a plan until they get hit, which is from Mike Tyson. And pretty much what he's saying is he was saying that even though you got a plan, things are going to happen, and you can't really expect them or be prepared for them. So make sure you're willing to obviously adapt to that situation and overcome any obstacle that comes your way. So that's what I pulled away from Mike Seaman. I thought he was a pretty good speaker. He was a pretty cool speaker. He had a lot of stuff to bring to the table with the leadership.
There's a military version of Mike Tyson saying that says, a plan is only good as first contact with the enemy. In other words, after you contact the enemy, the plan's going to have to change because you can't have a lot of everything.
Yes, sir.
Okay, one of the other speakers, he was a former 2-star admiral, but now his title's kind of confusing because they called him the assistant secretary and then he was talking about the State Department, so initially I assumed he was the assistant secretary of state. However, he's the assistant secretary of public affairs, or the Public Affairs Bureau. He's also the spokesperson for the State Department. So basically, he's the one who gives all the press conferences for the State Department when it's not the
I've seen him on
secretary.
CNN many times.
So both him and the other one I'm going to talk about gave fairly short speeches and then wanted most of it to be questions. But in his speech, he said one big thing when he started transitioning into public affairs was that a lot of his bosses were very open to giving them, or his bosses wanted advice from him. They kept an open dialogue between them that they were his boss and they told them what to say, but he was definitely allowed to give his opinion, at work, not when he went out in front of the public. And that was a big thing he also talked about was you represent your institution, you don't represent your own personal opinions, because that is especially true for him in press conferences, and then that's true for us as sailors. You can't, if you disagree with something your boss says, you don't go to your sailors and say, hey, this is stupid, if the boss says we gotta do this. That's a bad way to run business, because if you don't wanna do it, why do they wanna do it? So, another thing he brought up was, so when he applied to be, I don't know if it was for this job or for the Admiral, but he brought up 3 questions. The Blue Angels used this, and I think whoever was hiring him used these 3 questions. It was, what is the stupidest thing you've ever done? Who do you want to replace you? And who was your biggest influence? The biggest influence one, he said, was really hard because you have to pick one person. You can't pick, a whole bunch of people. You have to pick one and defend it. So later on, someone actually used those 3 questions for the 4-star Admiral. I think he refused to answer 2 of them. He only answered one of them, but is interesting. And then he said 3 big lessons about being in the Navy is you are indispensable. I think the quote he used was put your fist in a bucket of water and take it out, see how much the bucket of water is affected by it. Like that's how much, like you will make a difference in the Navy, but you're replaceable. So, you know, don't get too high, don't think too highly of yourself that like, no, they can't do this without me.
But that's important, right? I mean, we have to train our replacement. We have to be replaceable. What if you're in combat and you die? You know, somebody has to be able to do your job. That's a good thing. So don't look at it as I'm not an individual. Nope.
No,
you're not.
he meant it more in like, you need to realize like, don't think too highly of yourself. Like, no, I'm
Absolutely.
running everything. They depend on me. Like, no,
You can't have it that way.
be able to. And nobody comes to work wanting to do a bad job. So like when your sailors screw up, look at it in the sense of like they're doing their best. They tried to, you know, don't think highly of like, no, they didn't want to do it, or they, you know, everyone comes to work, they want to do a good job. You don't show up saying, oh, I'm going to do whatever I'm supposed to do really badly on purpose. And the biggest thing, he got this from his son, is actually enlisted in the Navy, and he asked him what advice should I give him at shipment. He said, respect your sailor's time. Like your time is valuable to you. You hate it when people waste your time. Your sailors are the same way. So.
And don't use PowerPoint.
What's that?
And he said don't use PowerPoint. That was the other thing.
Hey, that just a picture. So, and then most of his questions were actually about current events, since he is the spokesperson for the State Department. One of the good questions that the shipment asked was, how do you find unbiased news? Because I'm sure people who watch news that they feel is extremely biased. And he said, look at Al Jazeera or watch his press conferences. He asked the midshipman, do you watch my press conferences? He's like, no, sir, you don't want me to answer that. He's like, well, if you want the news, you know, he gives good press conferences. He talked a little bit about the Syrian ceasefire, that they worked on that. Important thing he talked about was, I know in a lot of the ceasefire agreements or the Iran deal, it's like a lot of people aren't happy about that, but it's good to just have an open dialogue going with the country, even if you don't like them, because you never know when it's going to help out. He brought out the incident with sailors. He said if we hadn't dealt with Iran in like a couple months earlier, it wouldn't have been so easy to get those sailors back. So even though, you know, we're not necessarily buddy-buddy, we know how to talk to them, and it can help with other events. Okay. This was, his name is Gumatau Tau, Admiral Gumatau Tau, in case you're wondering how to pronounce it. He was very awesome. You can see I have an entire page of notes. I will not read all of it word for word, but he had a lot of advice. He kind of circled around back to it, but he had a lot of really good points. So one of his first quotes was, things will be asked of you that at your age you shouldn't be asked to do. How will you deal with it? So like think about that, and you're gonna have some tough choices. You have to do tough things that other people, your friends your age, are not gonna have to deal with. They'll be worrying about other stuff. So just think about that. You're entering into the profession of arms. Know what that means. On lighter notes, just dealing with people. It's a people business. So yes, you have your technical proficiency and all that stuff, but you're also a leader. So learn how to listen to people. One quote that I like he said is, don't be thinking of a counter argument when someone's talking. Like you're having a conversation with someone, don't spend the whole time they're talking thinking of what am I going to say next to counter what they have to say. So make sure you listen to people. Learn the art of building relationships. And kind of back to with retired Admiral Kirby was your input counts. So your input counts up if you do it respectfully. Obviously, if you're trying to be, not nice with your input, it doesn't count. But so your input counts, and then make sure your subordinates know that too. Like don't just refuse to talk to them or refuse to take their input. At least listen to their input, and move on with it. Focus on what you bring to the ship. So this kind of goes against the irreplaceable part, but still, like when you're doing your job and it's getting tough, remember what you bring to the table and how you're helping your ship out. And a big thing he said was, don't be hard on yourself. Kind of like what she said earlier, like you're going to screw up, it's going to happen, but just do your best. He said you don't need to be perfect and you don't need to be the best, but I need you to be your best. So bring the best you can do to the table. What Gunnery Sergeant's always telling us, focus on the basics. He brought that up. Go back to the basics and learn your job. They said, as an ensign, you're not going to change the world at your level. So just learn your job, stick to that for now, and then just move up little by little.
And then he had a lot of recommended reading for him. He brought up at the beginning the poem The Watch. I've heard it when our former CO retired. It's an interesting poem, just kind of puts into perspective like how the Navy, people come and go from the Navy, but what we do, the watch, stays. So if you haven't read that or heard it, you should look it up. It's a short poem, it's not a book. So, 2 books he mentioned was Neptune's Inferno, and that was speaking to just warfare of the seas, that type of just like what happens with that, and Man in the Arena. Yeah, and then he took a whole lot of questions. He refused to take current events questions. He was like, no, don't ask me that stuff. Ask me about leadership stuff. Ask me what you're going to have to go through. And so he had really long responses for those too. Yeah, he gave a lot of good answers. He said if you show a lack of confidence, kind of what the sergeant major said, if you show a lack of confidence, your sailors will notice it and just try to be, or don't let them see your lack of confidence. And then the thing he kind of closed with is, I'm going to be leaving, I'm handing the watch to you. So, and that goes into the watch poem if you read it. And then do you want to talk about the end of this?
Yeah. So at the end of his speech, he called out, there were 9 of us there who had just ship selected, and he called us all up, and he lined us up, and he gave us each a swole pin, and he said, put this in your desk, put it somewhere, and look at it, and remember what you're working towards. So this will be my first swole pin, and I'm going to put it somewhere, I'm going to put it up in my stateroom when I get to my ship, and I'm going to be working towards this swole pin. And so he actually called us up and said it's time for a swole pin and a swole hug. So Midshipman King, thank God, caught this picture of me very awkwardly hugging the Admiral. So this is just solid gold. Thank you, Midshipman King.
I got you.
How come that didn't make it on a wardrobe slideshow this week?
It's a good question.
Maybe next week.
I took it after I sent you the picture. So
Very well.
next week.
Deadlines, guys.
All right, does everybody awake?
Yeah.
That was not convincing. Try again. Is everybody awake?
Yes, ma'am.
Better.
It's still
Okay, I'm asking because this guy is the best man I've ever heard talk in my life. As Bauer said, we kind of fought over who got it. I won. So, here we go. I'll try to keep it fast, I promise. But this is a very wordy slide because every single word that came out of this man's mouth was important. So, obviously, we've heard through this whole thing that this is a people business. Every single person who talked stressed that, which kind of caught me off guard because I more think military mission than people. Not the case whatsoever. So as you can see here, mission first, but Marines and sailors always. He also stressed on how do you win hearts. And I thought it was very interesting. He had a quote that said, "The only battle we fight as leaders is to earn the trust and hearts of our men. They win the rest of the battles." And I thought that was absolutely incredible. I've never thought of it like that before. So he says there's 2 ways. 1, selflessness. You are a selfless leader. And the other thing is, in that comes the fact that when your sailors or your Marines are doing the worst job ever, you get down there and you do it with them. You suffer right alongside. It builds character and it builds companionship, and it's the best way to get them to respect you. He also says that winning is a habit. Unfortunately, so is losing. And he just kind of started off the whole thing with that. So just don't make the habit of losing. Everything you do, make sure you do it right. Make sure you do it the way you want it. Hold it to that standard. He says, rarely resist the opportunity to keep your mouth shut. And maybe this is more a personal thing for me, but I thought that was incredibly helpful. He also never look back unless you intend to go that way. So yes, you live and you learn and you're gonna make mistakes, but don't dwell on those because those will set you right back to where you were beforehand. He also, trust was a big thing, and I know it was mentioned before, but he says, be dependable. If you are the same person every day, what you say and what you do doesn't change. Even just make sure you always hold yourself to that standard. Be honest, have integrity, and that will earn the trust of your sailors and Marines very easily. You won't have to do much more. Also, you can regain the confidence if you ever lose it from your people by doing the same thing. Own your mistakes. Never repeat them. So show that you learn from your mistakes. But also just be completely honest. Be a transparent leader. Obviously, if you're in a stressful situation, you stay calm, you hide that, and bury your own stress. But you need to be very transparent with what the mission is, what your goal is, and get those people to trust you. The more you learn, the less you know. So I found that very interesting because the more